Story 1. The Mirror Truck. Marcus Chen had been hauling freight across the Midwest for 12 years, and in all that time, he'd never seen anything that truly scared him. Winter of 2019 changed that forever. He was driving his Peterbilt 579 east on Interstate 80 through Nebraska, carrying a load of electronics from Sacramento to Chicago. The highway stretched endlessly before him, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through snow-covered plains under a sky so overcast it looked like concrete. It was 2:07 a.m. when he first noticed the truck behind him. Marcus always checked his mirrors religiously. Every trucker worth his salt did. But this rig appeared suddenly, as if it had materialized from the darkness itself. At first, he thought nothing of it. Another truck, a night run, probably heading to the same distribution center in Illinois. The headlights maintained a steady distance, maybe a quarter-mile back, bright enough to see clearly but not close enough to be threatening. Marcus adjusted his CB radio, listening to the scatter of other drivers in the area. He grabbed the mic. "This is Red Dragon eastbound on 80 just past mile marker 291. Anyone else out here in this frozen wasteland?" Static answered him. He tried again. "Any trucks eastbound between Grand Island and Lincoln, you got your ears on." Nothing but white noise. He checked the radio. It was working fine, lights all green. Strange, but not unprecedented. Sometimes these empty stretches just went quiet. He glanced in his driver's side mirror again. The truck was still there, maintaining that exact same distance. Marcus squinted, trying to make out details. It looked like a Peterbilt, similar to his own rig. Dark-colored, maybe black or deep blue, hard to tell in the darkness. The headlights were LED, bright and modern. As he watched, the truck's turn signal flickered on. Left turn signal. Marcus frowned. There was no exit coming up, no reason to signal. The blinking continued for exactly 15 seconds, then stopped. Marcus felt a prickle at the back of his neck. He pressed his foot down slightly on the accelerator, bringing his speed up from 70 to 75. The truck behind him matched his speed perfectly, maintaining that precise quarter-mile gap. He could see the windshield now, but not the driver. The cab was completely dark, no dashboard lights visible, no silhouette behind the wheel. That was wrong. Every truck had some light in the cab at night: instrument panels, CB radio displays, GPS screens. This one showed nothing but blackness behind the glass. The highway remained empty ahead of him. No other traffic, no cars, no trucks, just Marcus and the mirror truck behind him. He tried the CB again. "This is Red Dragon to any truck following eastbound on 80. You want to pass, buddy?" His own voice echoed back to him through the speaker, distorted and strange. Then he heard it clearly, his own voice saying the exact same words, but coming from the radio with a 1-second delay. "This is Red Dragon to any truck following eastbound on 80. You want to pass, buddy?" Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He hadn't transmitted that twice. He checked his GPS. The screen showed his location correctly, blue dot moving along the red line of the interstate. But there was another blue dot behind him, moving at exactly the same speed, maintaining that same distance. Impossible. GPS didn't track other vehicles like that. It only showed your own position. He decided to test something. Without signaling, Marcus suddenly moved into the left lane. The truck behind him, he could see it clearly in both mirrors now, moved into the left lane at exactly the same instant. Not a second later, not following his movement. Simultaneously, as if they were connected by invisible strings, Marcus's mouth went dry. He moved back into the right lane. The mirror truck did the same, perfectly synchronized. The temperature gauge on his dashboard dropped suddenly, needle swinging from 180 degrees down to 150, then 120. Cold air began seeping into the cab despite the heater running full blast. Marcus could see his breath forming clouds in the air. The windshield started fogging from the inside, frost creeping across the glass in crystalline patterns. He cranked the defroster to maximum, but the frost continued spreading, growing thicker. Through the rapidly frosting windshield, Marcus saw the exit sign for Lexington approaching. He made a snap decision and jerked the wheel right, taking the exit ramp at 60 miles per hour, far too fast for safety. His trailer swayed dangerously, tires squealing. He fought the wheel, keeping the rig under control as he decelerated down the ramp. His eyes shot to the mirrors. The mirror truck took the exit at exactly the same speed, in exactly the same manner, trailer swaying at precisely the same angle. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. The exit ramp fed into a deserted truck stop, closed, abandoned, parking lot empty and dark. He pulled into the lot and slammed on the brakes, bringing his rig to a complete stop. The mirror truck stopped behind him, still maintaining that quarter-mile distance, now in the parking lot instead of on the highway. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and phone. His hands were shaking. The phone showed no signal and the screen displayed 2:47 a.m., the exact same time he'd first noticed the truck. He looked at his dashboard clock, also 2:47 a.m. He watched the digital display for a full minute. The numbers didn't change. Time had stopped. He made himself look in the mirrors again. The truck sat there, engine running. He could see the exhaust in the frigid air, but still no driver visible. As Marcus watched, the truck's headlights flickered in a pattern. Long, 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 short, short, short. Long, long, long. SOS in Morse code. His own headlights began flickering the same pattern, completely independently, though his hand was nowhere near the switch. Then the mirror truck's driver's door opened. Marcus stopped breathing. A figure climbed down from the cab, and even from this distance, even in the darkness, Marcus could see enough. The figure wore a red plaid jacket, jeans, work boots. It moved toward Marcus's truck with a steady, purposeful walk. As it came closer, passing under one of the parking lot's dead streetlights that suddenly flickered to life, Marcus saw the face. It was his own face, but wrong. The eyes were completely black, no whites visible. The mouth hung open slightly, jaw slack. The skin looked gray, lifeless. This thing wearing his face, his clothes, his body, walked steadily toward his driver's side door. Marcus could hear the footsteps now, boots crunching on the frozen ground, getting closer. 30 feet away, 20 feet, 10 feet. Marcus turned the key, firing up his engine. It had been running this whole time, but somehow also needed to be started. The chronological impossibility didn't matter. He slammed the truck into gear and stomped the accelerator, tires spinning on ice, finding purchase. He rocketed out of the parking lot, not caring about the trailer's swing, focused only on escaping. Back on the entrance ramp, he merged onto the interstate going 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. He checked his mirrors compulsively, neck craning to see behind him. The parking lot was empty. No truck, no figure. The mirror truck had vanished completely. His dashboard clock suddenly jumped forward 2:48, 2:49, 2:50, time catching up in rapid jumps until it hit 3:17 a.m. and then it resumed normal speed. Marcus's phone buzzed. Signal had returned. A text message from his wife sent at 3:15 a.m. "Are you okay? You haven't checked in." He called her immediately, his voice shaking as he told her he was fine, just tired, would call her later. His CB radio crackled to life with normal trucker chatter. multiple voices discussing weather and road conditions. Everything had returned to normal. But in his driver's side mirror, for just a fraction of a second, Marcus saw the reflection of his own face in the sleeper berth behind him. Black eyes, slack jaw, staring at the back of his head. When he spun around, nothing was there. The sleeper berth was empty. Marcus continued to Chicago, delivered his load, and drove home to Portland. He told no one the full story. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him back. Sometimes, late at night when he's driving, his CB radio picks up his own voice from miles away, transmitting things he hasn't said yet. His GPS occasionally shows that second blue dot, maintaining its distance. And when he looks in his mirrors for too long, especially around 2:47 a.m., he sees that other truck. The mirror truck is always there, just out of sight, following him through the darkness, waiting for the moment when he'll stop again, and the thing wearing his face will finish walking those last 10 feet to his door. Marcus doesn't stop at night anymore. He drives straight through no matter how tired he gets, because he knows that if he stops, if he closes his eyes, he'll wake up to find himself standing outside his own truck looking in at a terrified stranger wearing his face, and then he'll understand that he wasn't the one who escaped that parking lot at all. Story 2. The Dead Mile. Rebecca Torres had driven every major highway in America during her 8 years as an operator, but she'd never encountered a road that didn't exist. September 2021, she was hauling furniture from Denver to Phoenix, taking Interstate 25 south through New Mexico. The GPS showed a clear route, nothing complicated, a drive she'd made dozens of times. The sun was setting as she passed through Socorro, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and purple. At 8:23 p.m., her GPS chimed with a notification. Faster route available. Save 43 minutes. A new route highlighted on the screen, showing a road that branched off I-25 near mile marker 115. The road was labeled Route 485. Rebecca frowned. She'd driven this stretch countless times and had never seen a Route 485. But the GPS was insistent, recalculating every few seconds, the new route flashing in bright blue. Traffic was heavy on I-25, backed up from an earlier accident. The detour would save nearly an hour. Rebecca signaled and took the exit where the GPS indicated. The off-ramp was there, real and solid, asphalt freshly paved. A green highway sign read, Route 485 Scenic Byway. Strange that she'd never noticed it before. The road curved away from the interstate, heading west into increasingly desolate terrain. The pavement was perfect, not a crack, not a repair patch, smooth as glass. No road markings, though. No center line, no edge lines, just uniform gray concrete stretching ahead into the gathering darkness. Rebecca turned on her headlights. The beams seemed to be swallowed by the darkness ahead, illuminating only 50 feet or so instead of the usual several hundred feet. She adjusted the lights, checked them, but they were functioning normally. The darkness itself seemed thicker here, more substantial. Her odometer ticked forward. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles down Route 485. The GPS showed her blue dot moving along the highlighted route, with 32 miles until she'd rejoin I-25 farther south. But something felt wrong. There were no utility poles, no fence lines, no signs of human presence whatsoever. The desert stretched away on both sides, completely empty. Not even scrub, brush, or cacti. Just flat, bare earth fading into blackness beyond her headlights. At mile 4, Rebecca saw the first marker. A wooden post on the right side of the road, about 4 feet tall, painted white. As she passed it, her headlights caught crude black lettering. Mile 1. She checked her odometer. She'd definitely driven 4 miles since leaving the interstate, not 1. Probably some old marker from before the road was renovated. She continued driving, watching the odometer. Mile 5, mile 6, mile 7. Another white post appeared. Mile 1. The exact same marker. Same style, same lettering, same position on the right side of the road. Rebecca's stomach tightened. She glanced at her GPS. It showed she'd traveled 9 miles on Route 485 with 23 miles remaining. But these markers both said mile 1. She pressed the accelerator slightly, bringing her speed up to 65. The headlights caught another marker. Mile 1, then another. Mile 1. They appeared every mile now, according to her odometer, but each one identical, each claiming to be the first mile. Rebecca grabbed her CB radio. "This is Desert Rose on Route 485 in New Mexico. Anybody out there familiar with this road?" Static. She tried her cell phone. No signal. The screen showed 1 bar, then 0, then 1 bar again, flickering uncertainly. Mile 10. Another mile 1 marker. Rebecca was fighting the urge to panic. The road remained arrow straight, no curves, no intersections, nothing but that perfect pavement stretching endlessly ahead. Her fuel gauge caught her eye. It had dropped from 3/4 full to half full. That was wrong. She'd only burned maybe a quarter tank at most, even accounting for the distance. She tapped the gauge. The needle didn't move from the halfway mark. At mile 12, she saw something different. A truck stop appeared ahead, lit up with bright fluorescent lights that seemed jarring after miles of darkness. A large sign read, "Mile 1 truck stop, gas, food, rest." Rebecca nearly cried with relief. She could ask for directions, figure out what was happening. She signaled and pulled into the parking lot, even though there was no other traffic to signal to. The truck stop looked modern, recently built, everything clean and new. But the parking lot was completely empty. No other trucks, no cars, no people. Every light was on inside the building, and she could see through the windows, aisles of merchandise, a lunch counter, all fully stocked and operational. But no one inside, not a single person. Rebecca shut off her engine and sat in her cab, staring at the empty building. She made herself get out, taking her flashlight even though the lot was well lit. The cold desert air hit her, but it smelled wrong. Not like desert. There was no creosote scent, no dust, no smell at all. The air was completely sterile, like breathing in nothing. Her boots echoed on the pavement as she approached the entrance. The glass doors were propped open. She stepped inside. A bell should have chimed. Didn't. The silence inside was absolute, oppressive. The fluorescent lights hummed, but it was a wrong hum, slightly off-pitch, wavering. Rebecca walked down the nearest aisle. The shelves were stocked with familiar brands, chips, candy, drinks, but all the labels were slightly wrong. A bag of Doritos, but the logo was backwards. A Coke bottle with the white ribbon going the wrong direction. Everything mirror reversed, as if seen through looking glass. The lunch counter had food under the heat lamps. Burgers, fries, hot dogs, all looking fresh. Rebecca reached out to touch a hamburger. It was cold, stone cold. She pulled her hand back and noticed the register. The digital display showed, Mile 1 welcome, scrolling continuously. Behind the counter, a door marked employees only stood slightly ajar. Against her better judgment, Rebecca pushed it open. The back room was impossibly large, stretching away into darkness that her flashlight couldn't penetrate. Shelves lined the walls, floor to ceiling, and on every shelf sat identical white markers. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, all reading Mile 1 in that same crude black lettering. The shelves extended back farther than should be physically possible, farther than the building's exterior dimensions would allow. Rebecca backed out of the room, her heart racing. She ran back to her truck, fumbled with the door, climbed inside and locked it. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The engine caught, and she threw the truck into gear, accelerating out of the parking lot. In her mirrors, she watched the truck stop recede. The lights blinked out all at once, and the building seemed to fade, becoming translucent, then vanishing completely. The empty desert swallowed it without a trace. Rebecca drove faster now, 70 miles per hour, pushing her speed. The mile markers appearing every mile. Mile 1, mile 1, mile 1. Her fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank, then to empty, but the engine kept running, kept pulling her forward. Her GPS showed she should be approaching the junction where Route 485 rejoined I-25. Just 5 more miles. 4, 3. At what should have been the junction, the road simply ended. Not at an intersection, not at a merge, it just stopped. The pavement terminated in a perfectly straight line, and beyond it was nothing. Not desert, not darkness. Nothing. A void. Rebecca slammed on her brakes, stopping inches from where the road ended. Her headlights shined into absolute emptiness, revealing no ground, no sky, no reference point of any kind. She sat there, frozen, staring into the void. Then, in her driver's side mirror, she saw lights approaching from behind. Another truck driving down Route 485 toward her position. It pulled up beside her, stopping parallel. Rebecca turned to look. The truck was identical to hers. Same model, same color, same company logo. And in the driver's seat sat a woman who looked exactly like Rebecca. Same face, same hair, same clothes. The mirror Rebecca looked at her with an expression of absolute despair and mouthed words through the glass. "Turn around. Drive back. You can't stay at mile 1. Rebecca watched in horror as the other truck pulled forward, driving over the edge where the road ended into the void. It didn't fall. It just continued, driving on invisible pavement, lights growing smaller and dimmer until they vanished completely into the nothingness. Rebecca's CB radio crackled. Her own voice came through. "This is Desert Rose. I've been driving Route 485 for 6 years. There is no end. There is no escape. There is only mile 1. Turn around before you understand." Rebecca threw her truck into reverse, backing away from the void's edge. She turned around, a complicated 40-point turn on the narrow road, and drove back the way she'd come. The mile 1 markers passed her going the opposite direction now, appearing on her left side. Her fuel gauge began rising, empty to quarter tank to half to 3/4. The odometer numbers were running backward, counting down instead of up. When she passed what she counted as the 25th marker, she saw the lights of I-25 ahead. The junction appeared real and solid. She accelerated onto the entrance ramp, merging with normal traffic, real cars and trucks driven by real people. Her GPS showed a regular route again. Her phone had full signal. The clock on her dashboard read 8:31 p.m. Only 8 minutes had passed since she'd taken the exit for Route 485. Rebecca pulled into the next truck stop she found, 20 miles south, and sat in the parking lot shaking for 2 hours. When she finally continued to Phoenix, she watched her GPS obsessively, ready to override it if it ever suggested a detour again. She delivered her load and filed a report with the highway department about a dangerous, unmarked road near mile marker 115 on I-25. The highway department wrote back 3 days later. Their records showed no Route 485 in New Mexico, no scenic byway in that area. The junction she described didn't exist on any map, any survey, any historical document. As far as official records were concerned, she'd never left I-25 at all. But Rebecca knows better. She knows that somewhere off the main roads in the spaces between places, Route 485 still exists, still collecting drivers who trust their GPS a little too much, who take the shortcut that saves 43 minutes. And somewhere on that road, trucks keep driving toward the void at the end, where mile one never ends and you never arrive anywhere at all. She sees the exit sometimes when she drives through New Mexico, the green sign flashing past, Route 485 Scenic Byway. Each time, she keeps driving straight, hands tight on the wheel, refusing to look at her GPS until the exit is miles behind her. Story 3. The Cargo. James Wheeler accepted the pickup in Memphis without asking questions. After 15 years hauling freight, he'd learned that the best-paying jobs were the ones where you didn't inquire too much about what you were transporting. The broker had been explicit. Pick up a sealed container at a private warehouse, deliver it to a facility outside Spokane, Washington. Payment was triple his usual rate. The only conditions were that he couldn't open the container, couldn't stop except for fuel, and had to maintain communication blackout. No CB radio, no phone calls, no unnecessary stops. The warehouse was in an industrial area of Memphis that James wasn't familiar with. His GPS directed him down increasingly narrow streets until he arrived at a building with no signage, no company name, just an address number on a rusted metal door. A forklift operator was waiting, a thin man in coveralls who didn't make eye contact or speak. He loaded a standard 20-foot shipping container onto James's flatbed trailer. The container was dark green, unadorned, with no shipping labels or identification markings. As the operator secured the straps, James noticed the locks. There were 6 heavy padlocks on the container's rear doors, industrial grade, the kind used for high-security shipments. The operator handed James a sealed envelope. "Instructions," he said. His voice was hoarse, strained. "Don't open until you're 50 miles out." Then he disappeared back into the warehouse, leaving James alone with his cargo. James pulled away from the loading dock at 11:00 p.m. on October 16, 2020. The weight felt normal, maybe 12,000 pounds, nothing unusual for a container this size. He took I-40 west, planning to connect to I-44, then I-70, a straight shot that would have him in Spokane in about 30 hours if he pushed straight through. At mile marker 50, he pulled off at a rest area and opened the envelope. The instructions were typed on plain white paper, no letterhead. "Do not open container under any circumstances. If you hear sounds from the cargo, ignore them. They are not real. Do not stop except for fuel. If container temperature exceeds 45 degrees Fahrenheit, call this number immediately." A phone number with a 202 area code, Washington, D.C. below that, a single line. "The cargo must not wake up." James read the last line 3 times. "Must not wake up." What the hell did that mean? He looked back at the container in his mirrors. Under the rest area's lights, it looked completely ordinary. Just another shipping container, same as thousands he'd hauled before. But that sentence bothered him. The cargo must not wake up, like it was alive, like it was sleeping. He got back on the highway, pushing his concerns aside. The money was too good to get spooked by dramatic wording. Probably just some corporate way of saying, "Keep it refrigerated," something. He checked the temperature gauge that had been installed on the container. It read 38 degrees, within parameters. 2 hours into the drive, somewhere in Oklahoma, James heard the first knock. 3 solid strikes against metal coming from inside the container. He glanced in his mirrors, then at the temperature gauge. Still 38 degrees. The knocking came again, more insistent. Bang, bang, bang. 3 evenly spaced impacts that rattled the container's walls. James tightened his grip on the wheel. The instructions had said sounds weren't real, but these sounds were very real. He could feel the vibration through the trailer. The knocking developed a pattern. 3 strikes, pause, 3 strikes, pause, 3 strikes. Repeating endlessly. James turned on his radio, trying to drown it out with music. The radio crackled with static, stations fading in and out, unable to hold a signal. Through the static, he thought he heard words, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." Matching the rhythm of the knocking, he turned the radio off. His hands were sweating. At a fuel stop in Amarillo, James walked around the container while the tanks filled. The metal was cold to the touch, frost forming at the seams. The temperature gauge read 36 degrees now, dropping. He pressed his ear against the container wall, listening. Silence at first. Then breathing slow, deep breaths, the kind someone takes in sleep. But massive breaths, too large to be human. Each exhale lasted 15 seconds, each inhale another 15. Whatever was inside had lungs the size of oil drums. James quickly finished fueling and got back on the road. He was starting to seriously regret taking this job. The breathing continued for hours, audible over his engine noise, over the wind, over everything. It had a rhythm that made James want to synchronize his own breathing to it, and he found himself fighting the urge, forcing himself to breathe irregularly to avoid falling into that pattern. In New Mexico, around 4:00 a.m., the breathing stopped. The silence was somehow worse. James checked his mirrors compulsively, expecting to see the container doors blown open, something escaping. But the container remained sealed, padlocks intact. The temperature gauge read 34 degrees. Still safe, still under 45. He pressed the accelerator, increasing speed to 75. He wanted this delivery over with. Dawn broke as he crossed into Colorado. The morning light should have been comforting, but it revealed something that made James's blood run cold. The container was sweating. Moisture beaded on the metal surface, running in rivulets down the sides, despite the freezing temperature reading. The water, or whatever it was, had a faint reddish tint. As James watched in his mirror, the liquid began forming patterns on the container's surface. Letters, words. "I am awake" spelled out in liquid across the green metal. Then it ran down, pooling at the bottom of the container, and new words formed. "I am hungry." James grabbed his phone to call the number from the instructions. No signal. He was in the mountains in a dead zone. The temperature gauge suddenly jumped from 34 to 42 to 46 degrees. Red warning light flashing. The container began to shake. Not violently, but rhythmically, as if something inside was moving, shifting position. The whole trailer swayed with the motion. James gripped the wheel tighter, fighting to keep the truck steady. In his mirror, he saw one of the padlocks snap open, the metal shackle breaking like it was made of plastic. Then another padlock broke. Then a third. James pushed the accelerator to the floor. His truck screamed up to 85 miles per hour, engine roaring. He had to reach a populated area, had to get where there were witnesses, other people. The fourth padlock broke. The fifth. In his mirror, James could see the container doors beginning to bow outward, pressure from inside pushing against them. The last padlock held. James flew down I-70, exceeding every speed limit, passing cars and trucks like they were standing still. He crested a rise and saw a Colorado Highway Patrol car parked on the shoulder. James laid on his horn, flashing his lights, hoping to get pulled over, hoping for any kind of help. The patrol car pulled out behind him, lights flashing, siren wailing. James started to slow down, but the temperature gauge on the container hit 50 degrees. The gauge's display started flickering, showing impossible numbers: 55, 60, 75, 100. The container was glowing now, heat waves visible in his mirrors. The last padlock was smoking, metal turning red hot. James made a split-second decision. He saw an emergency vehicle turn around ahead, one of those crossovers that only police and maintenance workers were supposed to use. He took it. The patrol car couldn't follow fast enough. James crossed the median, bounced over rough ground, and accelerated onto the eastbound lanes, now traveling the wrong direction, back the way he'd come. Traffic was light, and he managed to avoid collisions, other cars swerving away from the seemingly insane trucker driving toward them. He took the next exit, a small road leading into the mountains, away from the interstate. 5 miles up that mountain road in the middle of absolute nowhere, James jackknifed his trailer deliberately, sending it into a controlled skid. The container broke free from its restraints, sliding off the flatbed and tumbling down an embankment, rolling 3 times before coming to rest in a ravine 200 feet below the road. James stopped his truck, jumped out, and ran to the edge to look. The container lay on its side, doors burst open, hanging loose. Whatever had been inside was gone. He could see drag marks leading away into the dense forest, deep furrows in the earth like something massive had pulled itself out and crawled away. The inside of the container was visible from this angle, just bare metal walls, no refrigeration unit, no cargo, nothing. Except for the scratches. The interior was covered in deep gouges, claw marks that had torn through quarter-inch steel like it was paper. The Colorado Highway Patrol arrived 10 minutes later, arresting James for reckless driving, evading police, and a dozen other charges. He told them everything: the container, the instructions, the sounds, the heat. They looked at him like he was insane. A hazmat team was called to investigate the container. Their report stated they found nothing hazardous, no biological material, no dangerous substances, just an empty shipping container. The interior damage was consistent with normal wear and tear. James spent 3 days in jail before the broker posted his bail. The same broker who'd hired him showed up with documents for James to sign: non-disclosure agreements, release of liability forms, a contract stating he would never discuss the cargo or the delivery. In exchange, all charges would be dropped, and he'd receive his payment plus a substantial bonus. James signed everything. He took his truck and home to Louisiana, where he parked it in his driveway and hasn't driven commercially since. The broker called him once more, 3 months later, asking if he'd accept another high-paying delivery. James hung up without answering. But sometimes, late at night, James drives out to the rural areas outside Baton Rouge and parks his truck on empty roads. He turns off the engine and listens. And maybe once a month he hears it. That same slow, massive breathing coming from somewhere in the darkness beyond his headlights. Deep inhales lasting 15 seconds, exhales lasting 15 more. The sound of something enormous, something that should not exist, breathing in the Louisiana night. He never investigates. He just starts his truck and drives away. Because James knows that whatever he delivered, whatever was in that container, it wasn't contained anymore. It's out there now, somewhere in the forests and mountains of America. Sleeping in caves, hiding in abandoned places, waking up when it gets too warm, when the temperature rises above 45 degrees. And James knows that eventually, probably soon, some other trucker will get a call from a broker offering triple rate for a simple delivery. They'll pick up a sealed container. They'll receive instructions telling them the cargo must not wake up, and they won't believe it's real until they hear the knocking, 3 solid strikes against metal, coming from something that should have stayed asleep forever. Story 4. The Static Highway. Daniel Park had been driving his 2018 Freightliner Cascadia for 3 years without incident when he encountered the phenomenon on Highway 50 through Nevada. The route was notorious among truckers, nicknamed the loneliest road in America, but Daniel had never experienced anything unusual during his previous trips. July 2022 changed everything. He was hauling mining equipment from Salt Lake City to Reno, a straightforward run he'd made at least 24 times. The trouble started around 3:00 a.m. near Ely, Nevada. Daniel's radio began picking up interference, a low crackling static that made normal communication impossible. He switched channels on his CB, trying to find a clear frequency. Every channel produced the same static, but underneath it, he could hear patterns. Not quite words, but rhythmic pulses that sounded almost like language. He turned the radio off, deciding to drive in silence rather than listen to the irritating noise. 30 miles west of Ely, the static started coming from his phone. Even with the device sitting on his dashboard, powered on but not in use, he could hear that same crackling sound emanating from its speaker. Daniel picked up the phone. The screen showed full signal strength, but when he tried to make a call, nothing happened. The static grew louder, and underneath it, those rhythmic pulses intensified. Daniel powered the phone down completely, but the static continued. The phone was off, screen black, yet sound still emerged from it. He threw the phone in the passenger side footwell, trying to ignore it. His GPS system started glitching, the screen flickering between normal map display and static-filled screens. The blue dot representing his position began jumping erratically, showing him in multiple locations simultaneously. On the highway, 10 miles north, 15 miles south, somehow in 3 places at once. Daniel relied on his knowledge of the road, following the painted lines, watching for the mile markers he knew would appear regularly. The mile markers were wrong. He passed marker 321, then marker 322, then marker 319. The numbers weren't sequential, jumping forward and backward randomly. Daniel's odometer showed he was traveling at 65 miles per hour, consistently, yet the mile markers suggested he was simultaneously moving forward and backward on the highway. His fuel gauge began fluctuating wildly, swinging from full to half to 3/4 to 1/4, never settling on a single reading. At 3:47 a.m., Daniel saw headlights approaching from the west, another truck coming toward him in the opposite lane. As the truck passed, Daniel saw the driver clearly in his lights, a man with dark hair, glasses, wearing a blue shirt. The other driver raised his hand in the traditional trucker wave. Daniel waved back. 30 seconds later, he saw the same truck approaching again. Same company logo, same driver with dark hair and glasses, same blue shirt. The driver waved again, and this time his expression showed confusion, as if he recognized Daniel but couldn't understand why. The truck passed. 30 seconds later, it approached again. Same truck, same driver, same wave, but the driver looked frightened. He was pointing at Daniel urgently, gesturing for him to turn around. The truck passed. 30 seconds. The truck approached again. This time the driver was screaming, mouth open wide, face contorted in terror, both hands off the wheel and pressed against his windshield. The truck passed within inches of Daniel's rig, and he saw that the other driver's hands were bloody, leaving red smears on the glass. Then no more trucks came. The highway stretched empty in both directions, no traffic at all. The static from Daniel's phone intensified, now joined by static from his radio, his GPS, and his dashboard displays. Multiple sources of crackling noise filled the cab, overlapping, creating interference patterns. And within those patterns, Daniel began to hear actual words. Turn back. Wrong direction. Not supposed to be here. Road is closed. The voices were distorted, layered, dozens of different speakers all saying different things simultaneously. Daniel recognized some of the voices: his wife, his dispatcher, his brother. People who couldn't possibly be broadcasting to him, speaking through devices that were powered off or didn't have transmission capabilities. Daniel's headlights began dimming, as if the power was draining from his electrical system. The beams shortened from illuminating 300 feet ahead to 200 to 100. The darkness beyond pressed in, seeming thicker and more solid than normal night. Within that darkness, shapes moved. Large shapes keeping pace with his truck, running alongside on both sides of the highway. Daniel couldn't make out details, just mass and motion. Things that shouldn't be able to match a truck traveling 65 miles per hour. His engine temperature began rising. The gauge climbed from normal operating temperature to 210, 220, 230 degrees. Warning lights flashed across his dashboard. But when Daniel looked at his temperature gauges, they read normal. The warning lights would flash, then disappear, then flash again with different warnings. Low oil pressure, high oil pressure, battery failure, all systems normal. The truck was simultaneously failing and operating perfectly. The white lines on the highway started moving, not staying still while Daniel drove over them, but actually writhing, twisting like living things. They formed patterns, symbols, shape to look at. Daniel focused his gaze straight ahead, refusing to watch the lines, but peripheral vision caught their movement. The yellow center line was doing the same thing, undulating like a snake, occasionally spelling out words: stop, turn, leave, go back. Daniel's rearview mirrors showed impossible reflections. In the driver's side mirror, the road behind him was daylight, bright sun shining on the same stretch of highway. In the passenger side mirror, the road was on fire, flames consuming the asphalt. In his center mirror, the road wasn't there at all, just empty desert with no highway, no trace that a road had ever existed. All three views completely different, all three supposedly showing the same scene behind his truck. At 4:15 a.m., Daniel saw a rest area ahead, lights on, looking like a normal highway facility. He pulled in, desperate for anything familiar, anything that made sense. The parking lot contained 6 other trucks, all parked in neat rows. Daniel pulled into a space and shut off his engine. The static stopped instantly. Silence. Complete silence. No wind, no engine sounds from the other trucks, no normal background noise of any kind. Daniel climbed out of his cab. The air felt wrong, too thick, too warm, like breathing syrup. The other trucks were identical. Same make, same model, same color, same company logos. All of them exactly like Daniel's truck, perfect copies. He approached the nearest one and looked in the driver's window. A man sat in the cab, hands on the wheel, eyes staring straight ahead. The man looked exactly like Daniel. Same face, same clothes, same body. The copy didn't move, didn't blink, frozen like a statue. Daniel checked the other trucks. Each one contained a duplicate of himself, sitting motionless, staring forward. 6 copies, 6 trucks, all perfectly still. Daniel backed away slowly, returning to his own truck. He climbed inside and looked at himself in his rearview mirror. His reflection moved a fraction of a second late, not quite synchronized with his actual movements. When Daniel raised his hand, His reflection raised its hand a moment later. When he blinked, his reflection blinked after a noticeable delay. He started his engine. The sound was wrong, slightly off-pitch, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Daniel threw the truck gear and accelerated out of the rest area. As he pulled away, he looked in his mirrors. All 6 of the parked trucks started their engines simultaneously. Their headlights came on. They pulled out of their parking spaces in perfect coordination and followed Daniel onto the highway. 7 identical trucks now traveled west on Highway 50, Daniel in the lead, 6 copies following in single file. Daniel pushed his speed to 75. The copies matched his speed exactly. He varied his pace, speeding up and slowing down randomly. The copies followed perfectly, maintaining precise spacing. He tried to radio them, tried to communicate, but received only static in response. The static began forming actual sentences now, clear and understandable. You are the copy. We are the originals. You are the copy. We are the originals. Over and over in his own voice, speaking through all his devices simultaneously. Daniel looked at his hands on the steering wheel. They looked normal, felt normal, but a growing dread filled him. How could he know if he was the original? What if he was one of the copies, believing himself to be real? He saw a sign ahead, Ely 30 miles. But he'd already passed Ely heading west. That sign should be behind him. He was either turned around without realizing it, or the road had somehow looped back. The mile markers confirmed it. He was passing marker 321 again, the same marker from an hour earlier. He was traveling a closed loop, a stretch of highway that fed back into itself. Daniel made a decision. At the next crossroad, a small state route heading south, he jerked his wheel and took the turn without signaling, without warning. The 6 following trucks continued straight on Highway 50, unable or unwilling to follow. In his mirrors, Daniel watched them grow smaller, their lights eventually disappearing. He traveled the state route for 20 miles, then connected to Highway 6, taking a longer route to Reno. His radio cleared. The static vanished. His GPS returned to normal, showing accurate position. His phone powered back on, displaying the correct time, 5:30 a.m. All his systems normalized. The sun began rising, painting the Nevada desert in shades of gold and red. Everything seemed fine. Daniel delivered his load in Reno, told no one about his experience, and accepted job, a run from Reno back to Salt Lake City. The dispatcher routed him on Highway 50. Daniel refused, insisting on taking the longer route via Interstate 80. The dispatcher argued, said Daniel was being ridiculous, asked what was wrong with 50. Daniel couldn't explain, just repeated that he wouldn't drive Highway 50. The company eventually accommodated his request, but Daniel noticed changes in how people treated him. Coworkers gave him odd looks. His dispatcher seemed wary. His wife said he seemed different somehow, though she couldn't explain how. Little things were wrong. His favorite foods tasted slightly off. His house felt unfamiliar in subtle ways. His memories didn't quite match what other people remembered about shared experiences. Daniel drives routes through Nevada still, but never Highway 50. He avoids it completely, taking hours-long detours to stay off that road. Because late at night, when he's driving other highways, he sometimes sees them in his mirrors. 6 identical trucks following him, maintaining perfect spacing, their headlights forming a constellation in the darkness behind him. They never get closer, never catch up. Just follow, always there when he checks his mirrors on dark roads. 7 Daniel Parks driving through the Nevada night, and none of them completely certain anymore which one is real. Story 5. The Passenger. Thomas Chen had a strict policy against picking up hitchhikers. 20 years of long-haul trucking had taught him that giving strangers rides invited trouble, liability issues, theft, assault, countless possibilities for disaster. But on a freezing February night in 2023, driving through Montana on Highway 2, Thomas broke his own rule. He would regret that decision for the rest of his life. The figure appeared in his headlights at 1:00 a.m., standing on the shoulder near mile marker 143, about 40 miles east of Cut Bank. A woman in her 30s, wearing a red winter coat, jeans, and boots appropriate for the weather. She wasn't waving frantically or showing signs of distress, just standing there with her thumb out, face neutral, as if hitchhiking in the middle of nowhere at 1:00 a.m. was the most normal thing in the world. Thomas drove past, following his policy, but something made him check his mirrors. The temperature outside was -15 degrees. Wind chill made it far worse. No broken-down car was visible on the shoulder. No lights, no other traffic. The woman stood alone in the killing cold, and as Thomas watched in his mirror, she didn't move, didn't react to his passing, just stood there with her thumb out. Thomas cursed himself for his soft heart, hit his brakes, and pulled over. The passenger door opened and the woman climbed in with practiced ease, moving like someone familiar with truck cabs. "Thanks for stopping," she said. Her voice was pleasant, accentless, completely normal. "I've been stuck out here for 2 hours. Car broke down about 15 miles back. Phone's dead." "You're a lifesaver." She smiled at Thomas and her smile seemed genuine. "I'll take you as far as Cut Bank," Thomas said. "There's a truck stop there. You can call for help." He pulled back onto the highway, checking his mirrors carefully before accelerating. The woman settled into the passenger seat, pulling her coat tighter around herself. Thomas noticed she didn't seem particularly cold despite claiming to have been standing outside for 2 hours in sub-zero temperatures. They drove in silence for a few miles. Thomas glanced at his passenger periodically, trying to be subtle. She looked completely normal. Pretty in an ordinary way, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry. Her hands rested in her lap, gloved in black leather. She stared out the windshield at the road ahead, not looking at Thomas, not looking at the passing landscape, just staring forward with an expression of intense concentration. "What's your name?" Thomas asked, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. "Sarah," she replied. "What's yours?" "Thomas." "Where were you heading before your car broke down?" "West," she said. Just that single word, offering no additional details. Thomas waited for elaboration that didn't come. Sarah continued staring forward, and Thomas noticed her eyes weren't tracking movement properly. When his headlights illuminated road signs or passing landmarks, her gaze didn't shift to follow them. She stared at a fixed point straight ahead, eyes unmoving. At mile marker 158, Sarah spoke again. "You should slow down. There's ice ahead." Thomas checked his speedometer. He was doing 62, his normal cruising speed for this road. The highway looked fine, no visible ice. But he to 55 anyway, trusting the local knowledge of someone who presumably drove this route regularly. 30 seconds later, his headlights caught a patch of black ice spanning both lanes. Thomas navigated it carefully, his reduced speed preventing a potentially deadly skid. "Thanks for the warning," he said. "How did you know that was there?" "I've driven this road before," Sarah replied. Her voice had no inflection, no emotion. She delivered the words in a flat monotone, like reading from a script. Thomas felt the first real stirrings of unease. Something was wrong with his passenger, but he couldn't identify what. Nothing obvious, nothing he could point to, just a growing wrongness that made his skin crawl. At mile marker 165, Sarah spoke again. "There's a deer about to cross. Left side, 3 seconds. Thomas looked left, saw nothing, started to dismiss the warning. Then a mule deer bounded out of the darkness directly into his path. He hit the brakes, tires squealing, and the deer cleared his front bumper by inches. Thomas's heart hammered. That would have been a serious collision, potentially fatal at highway speeds. "Jesus Christ," Thomas breathed. "You've got amazing eyes. I didn't see that deer at all until it was right there." Sarah didn't respond. She continued staring forward, hands motionless in her lap. Thomas looked at her more carefully now, paying attention to details he'd missed. Her chest wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing. He watched for 30 seconds, counting, making sure. No breath, no rise and fall of her chest, no visible exhalation in the cold cab air. Nothing. "Sarah," Thomas said slowly, "are you okay? You don't look well." "I'm fine," she said in that same flat monotone. "I'm exactly as I should be." Her hands remained perfectly still in her lap, not shifting, not fidgeting. Thomas realized he hadn't seen her blink once since she'd gotten in the truck. Her eyes stayed open, unmoving, staring forward. No living person could keep their eyes open that long without blinking. Thomas felt his fear crystallizing into something sharp and cold. This woman wasn't right. Whatever she wasn't a normal hitchhiker. He needed to get her out of his truck. "You know what?" he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I just remembered I need to make a stop before Cut Bank. There's a gas station about 5 miles up. I'll drop you there. You can wait inside where—" "No," Sarah said. "You'll take me to Cut Bank as you promised." It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact, delivered with absolute certainty. Thomas felt ice forming in his stomach. He reached for his CB radio, thinking he'd call for help, explain that he had a disturbed passenger. Before his hand reached the mic, Sarah spoke again. "Don't," she said. Still no emotion, still that flat monotone. "You need both hands on the wheel. In 8 seconds the road curves. If you don't maintain control, you'll crash, you'll die. I don't want you to die, Thomas. I'm trying to keep you alive." Thomas pulled his hand back from the radio. 8 seconds later, the highway curved sharply right, a turn he hadn't been expecting. He gripped the wheel tightly, navigating the curve. A sign flashed past. "Sharp curve, 30 mph. Thomas was doing 55. Without Sarah's warning, without his hands ready on the wheel, he might not have made the turn. "What are you?" Thomas whispered. His hands were shaking now, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles showed white. "You're not human. You're not breathing. You're not blinking. What the fuck are you?" Sarah turned her head for the first time, looking directly at Thomas. Her eyes were wrong. They weren't glass, weren't obviously artificial, but they didn't have the depth of human eyes. They looked flat, two-dimensional, like poorly rendered graphics. "I'm a passenger," she said. "I ride with drivers. I help them reach their destination safely. I've been riding this highway for 7 years, Thomas. I've saved 43 drivers from crashes. You're number 44. "You're dead," Thomas said, the realization crashing over him. "You died on this highway. You're a ghost or something. You're dead and you're haunting this road." His voice rose with each sentence, panic bleeding through. He wanted to pull over, wanted to order her out, wanted this nightmare to end. "I'm a passenger," Sarah repeated. "Whether I'm alive or dead doesn't matter. What matters is keeping you safe. In 2 miles, there's a semi-truck in the opposite lane. The driver is falling asleep. He'll drift into your lane. You need to be ready to avoid him." Her voice remained emotionless, delivering potential death with the same inflection someone might use to comment on the weather. Thomas drove those 2 miles in a cold sweat. His eyes strained ahead, searching for the approaching headlights. When they appeared, the semi was driving normally, staying in its lane. Thomas began to hope Sarah was wrong. Then, exactly as she'd predicted, the opposite lane truck drifted across the center line, directly into Thomas's path. Thomas jerked his wheel right, riding the shoulder, inches from the guardrail. The sleeping driver's truck passed within a foot of Thomas's trailer, air horns blaring. The near miss left Thomas gasping. "You're saving my life," Thomas said. "But I didn't ask for this. I don't want this. I want you out of my truck." "I can't leave until we reach Cut Bank," Sarah said. "That's where I'm going. That's where I always go. Then I wait for the next driver and I do it again." She turned her head back to face forward, resuming her unblinking stare. "I died at mile marker 143, car accident, February 14, 2016. I stood on the shoulder waiting for help. I got hypothermia. I froze to death before anyone stopped. Now I'm the help. Now I make sure other people survive this highway." Thomas drove in silence, trying to process this. A ghost in his passenger seat. A helpful ghost, a benevolent haunting if such things existed. But her presence terrified him in ways he couldn't articulate. The wrongness of her, the flat monotone, the unmoving eyes, the lack of breath. Every instinct screamed that this thing beside him should not be possible. Mile marker 180 approached. Sarah spoke again. "The truck stop is 3 miles ahead. You'll see the lights soon. I'll leave you there." She paused, and for the first time, something like emotion entered her voice. "Thomas, I need you to do something for me. I need you to tell people about this. Tell them to stop for stranded drivers on Highway 2. Tell them not to leave people standing in the cold. If one person stops because of your story, if one person helps, then I've done enough. Maybe then I can stop riding. Maybe then I can rest." The lights of Cut Bank appeared ahead, the truck stop signs glowing in the darkness. Thomas pulled into the parking lot, drove to the fuel pumps, and stopped. He sat there, hands on the wheel, afraid to look at his passenger seat. After a long moment, he forced himself to turn his head. Sarah was gone. The passenger seat was empty. The door was closed. He hadn't heard it open. She had simply vanished as if she'd never been there. Thomas reached over and touched the seat. It was freezing cold, frost forming on the fabric, like someone had left the door open in sub-zero temperatures. Thomas climbed out of his truck on shaking legs. He went into the truck stop and asked the clerk if they'd seen a woman in a red coat, if anyone had come inside in the last few minutes. The clerk looked at him strangely and said no, the place had been empty all night. Thomas described Sarah. The clerk's face went pale. "That sounds like Sarah Mitchell," the clerk said. "She died on Highway 2 back in 2016, froze to death waiting for help. People say they see her sometimes hitchhiking near where she died. You saw her." Thomas nodded, unable to speak. He returned to his truck, delivered his load, and drove home. He told his wife everything, told his dispatcher, told anyone who would listen. Most people thought he'd been hallucinating from exhaustion, seeing things that weren't there. But other drivers contacted him privately, admitting they'd had similar experiences on Highway 2. A woman in a red coat who predicted accidents, who saved their lives, who vanished at the Cut Bank truck stop. Thomas doesn't drive Highway 2 anymore. He refuses routes through Montana, takes longer alternative paths. Because Sarah said she'd leave him at Cut Bank, but sometimes, late at night when he's driving dark highways in other states, Thomas sees her in his peripheral vision, sitting in the passenger seat, staring forward, not breathing, not blinking. And when he turns his head to look directly, she's not there. But the seat is always freezing cold, frost forming on the fabric, and Thomas knows that Sarah is still riding with him. still watching, still trying to keep him safe. A passenger he can never drop off, following him forever through the darkness, and Thomas doesn't know if he's blessed or cursed. Story 6. The repeating truck stop. Vincent O'Connor prided himself on his memory for routes and locations. 12 years of cross-country trucking had given him an encyclopedic knowledge of truck stops, rest areas, and diesel stations across America. When he pulled into a Flying J outside of Omaha, Nebraska on March 3, 2024, at 10:45 p.m., Vincent was absolutely certain he'd never been to this location before. The building was unfamiliar, the layout was new, and the parking lot configuration matched none of his previous stops. He parked, went inside to get coffee and used the restroom, spent 15 minutes and returned to his. When Vincent pulled back onto the highway, his GPS showed he'd traveled exactly 0 miles. The screen displayed his location as still being at the Flying J truck stop, even though he was now driving 65 miles per hour on I-80 westbound. Vincent tapped the GPS screen, tried resetting it, but the display remained frozen on the truck stop location. After 10 minutes of driving, his odometer showing 6 miles traveled, Vincent saw signs for a Flying J ahead. He pulled off the exit, curious to see if it was another location in the chain. It was the same truck stop. Identical parking lot configuration, same building layout, same fuel pump arrangement. Vincent walked inside. The same clerk stood behind the counter, a young man with red hair and a name tag reading Kevin. Vincent had spoken to this clerk 15 minutes earlier. "Did you forget something?" Kevin asked, smiling in recognition. "No," Vincent said slowly. "I was just here, then I left. I drove 10 miles down the highway. How am I back here?" Kevin's smile faltered. He looked confused. "You didn't leave," Kevin said. "You've been parked outside this whole time. I can see your truck through the window, same spot you parked in 20 minutes ago." He pointed. Vincent turned and looked. His truck sat in the parking lot in the exact space he'd originally chosen. Vincent felt a cold finger trace down his spine. "That's impossible. I drove away. I was on the highway. I saw the exit sign and pulled off." Kevin's expression showed genuine concern now. "Sir, are you feeling okay? You've been parked here for 20 minutes. You came in, got coffee, used the restroom, and went back to your truck. You never left the parking lot." Vincent returned to his truck, his heart pounding. His odometer showed he'd traveled 16 miles since last stopping. His fuel gauge showed he'd burned fuel consistent with 16 miles of driving. His GPS, however, insisted he'd never moved from the truck stop location. Vincent sat in his cab, trying to make sense of this. Had he dozed off? Dreamed the drive? He felt completely awake, alert, with no signs of fatigue. He decided to try again. Vincent started his engine, pulled out of the parking lot and merged onto I-80 westbound. He set his cruise control to 65 and watched his odometer carefully. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. His GPS remained frozen on the truck stop location. At 10 miles, he saw the Flying J sign again. Exit 439, same as before. Vincent took the exit, already knowing what he'd find. Same truck stop, same parking lot, same clerk named Kevin. Vincent walked inside again. Kevin looked at him, and for a fraction of a second, Vincent saw recognition in the clerk's eyes. Then it faded, replaced by a standard greeting. "Welcome to Flying J, can I help you find anything?" As if they'd never met, as if Vincent hadn't been here twice already. "Kevin," Vincent said, "do you remember me? I was just here. I spoke to you 15 minutes ago." Kevin shook his head politely. "Sorry, sir, I don't think so. We get a lot of customers, though. Easy to lose track. Can I help you with something?" Vincent bought a candy bar, something he could use to mark the visit, a concrete proof. He kept the receipt and the candy bar wrapper. Then he returned to his truck and tried again. This time he drove 20 miles, watching his odometer the entire time, making sure he wasn't hallucinating the distance. 20 miles exactly, and then the Flying J sign appeared. Exit 439. He took the exit. Same truck stop. Vincent parked and went inside. Kevin stood behind the counter. Vincent held up the candy bar wrapper and receipt. "I bought this here 30 minutes ago. You sold it to me. Do you remember?" Kevin looked at the receipt, his expression puzzled. "This receipt is from this store, but I didn't sell you this. Our system shows the last candy bar sale was 3 hours ago." He turned the computer screen toward Vincent, showing the transaction log. No record of Vincent's purchase existed. Vincent pulled out his phone and took photos of the truck stop exterior, of Kevin, of the parking lot, of his truck with the odometer showing 36 miles driven. He returned to his truck, placed the phone on his dashboard, and drove away again. This time he spoke out loud, narrating his actions. "I'm leaving the truck stop. It's 11:30 p.m. My odometer reads 347,836 miles. I'm heading west on I-80. I'm going to drive exactly 30 miles and see what happens." He drove carefully, maintaining speed, watching the odometer. 28 miles. 29 miles. 30 miles. The J sign appeared. Vincent felt his hands trembling on the wheel. He took the exit and parked in a different spot this time, deliberately choosing a space on the opposite side of the lot. He checked the photos on his phone. They showed the previous visits: the truck stop exterior, Kevin behind the counter, Vincent's truck parked in different locations. Proof that he'd been here multiple times. Vincent walked inside. Kevin stood behind the counter, same position, same posture. "Welcome to Flying J," Kevin said with a smile. Vincent held up his phone, showing Kevin the photos. "I've been here 4 times now. I keep leaving and driving down the highway, but I always end up back here. Look at these photos. Do you see yourself in this picture? That's you, standing right where you are now. I took this photo an hour ago." Kevin looked at the photos, and Vincent saw something change in his expression. Fear, recognition. "You need to stop coming back," Kevin whispered. "You need to break the loop. Every time you come back, it gets stronger. It gets harder to leave." Vincent leaned closer. "What are you talking about? What loop?" Kevin glanced around nervously, as if checking for eavesdroppers. The truck stop was empty except for them. "This place isn't right," Kevin said quietly. "I've been working here for 6 years. Same shift, same hours every night. I can't remember the last time I went home. I can't remember where home is. I serve customers, they leave, they come back. Some of them come back 20 times, 30 times. They keep trying to leave, but they always end up here. Eventually, they stop trying. They just stay. Park their trucks and stay forever." Vincent felt ice forming in his stomach. Where are these people, these drivers who stayed? Kevin pointed out the window at the parking lot. Vincent saw what he'd missed before. Trucks parked in the far corners of the lot, covered in dust and grime, looking like they hadn't moved in years. 15 or 20 rigs, all dark, all apparently abandoned. "They're in their trucks," Kevin said. "They sleep. They don't eat, don't need to. They just sleep in their cabs, and sometimes they come inside for a few minutes, then go back. They're not really alive anymore. They're part of the loop." Vincent backed away from the counter. This couldn't be real. This was insane. "How do I get out?" he demanded. "How do I break the loop?" Kevin shook his head helplessly. "I don't know. I'm trapped same as everyone else. I've tried 100 times. I walk out the door, start walking down the highway. But I always end up back behind this counter like I never left. We're all stuck. This place keeps us here." Vincent ran to his truck, climbed inside, and locked the doors. He had to think, had to figure this out. The loop seemed to trigger when he drove down I-80 westbound. So what if he went eastbound instead? Drove back the way he'd come. He started his engine, pulled onto the entrance ramp, but instead of merging west, he took the eastbound lanes, heading back toward Omaha. He drove 10 miles east. The highway looked normal, other traffic passing him, signs appearing at appropriate intervals. Hope surged in Vincent's chest. He was escaping. The loop was broken. Then he saw the sign, Flying J exit 439 1 mile. That wasn't possible. Exit 439 was west of his location, not east. But the sign was there, green and reflective and undeniably real. Vincent took the exit and found the same truck stop, same parking lot, same building. He tried going north on a state highway, then south, then took access roads, then county routes. Every path, every direction, no matter what he did, after 10 to 30 miles of driving, he'd see the Flying J sign and find himself back at exit 439, back at the same truck stop, as if space itself looped back to this single point. Vincent spent hours trying every combination, every possible route, but the result was always identical. The truck stop was inescapable. At 4:00 a.m., exhausted and terrified, Vincent parked his truck in the lot and sat in his cab, trying to think clearly. His fuel gauge showed a quarter tank remaining, despite hours of driving that should have emptied his tanks completely. His odometer showed over 200 miles traveled, all of it going nowhere. Through his windshield, he could see those abandoned trucks in the far corners of the lot. Drivers who'd given up, drivers who'd become part of the loop. Vincent refused to accept that fate. He grabbed his phone and started texting everyone he knew, his dispatcher, his wife, his friends. "I'm trapped in a loop at exit 439, I-80 in Nebraska. Flying J truck stop. Can't escape. Send help." He sent the messages and waited. No response came. His phone showed the messages as delivered, but when he checked his sent folder, they weren't there. As if he'd never sent them. He tried calling 911. The line connected, rang twice, and then Vincent heard his own voice answer. 911, what's your emergency? His own voice, speaking words he wasn't saying, coming through his phone speaker. Vincent hung up immediately, his skin crawling. Every attempt to communicate with the outside world looped back to himself, messages and calls feeding back into the closed system of the truck stop. Dawn came, light spreading across the parking lot. Other trucks began arriving, new drivers pulling in for fuel and rest. Vincent watched them carefully. They parked, went inside, came out, and left. Normal visits. They didn't get trapped. The loop didn't affect them. Vincent approached one driver as he was walking to his truck. "Excuse me," Vincent said. "Has anything strange happened to you here? Have you had any problems leaving?" The driver looked at Vincent oddly. "No, everything's fine. Why, you having truck trouble?" Vincent didn't answer, just backed away. The driver shrugged and climbed into his cab. Vincent watched him start his engine, pull out of the lot, and merge onto I-80 westbound. The truck drove away normally, disappearing into traffic, escaping without issue. Why could that driver leave while Vincent could? Vincent spent another day at the truck stop, trying to understand the pattern. He bought food from the convenience store, Kevin always working, always serving, always acting like it was their first meeting. Vincent tested the food and water. It tasted normal, satisfied hunger and thirst. He slept in his cab, and when he woke, it was night again. His phone showed 24 hours had passed, but it felt like he'd only slept for a few minutes. On the second night, Vincent made a decision. He would try one more time to escape, but this time he wouldn't stop. No matter what signs appeared, no matter what exits he saw, he would keep driving straight, ignore every temptation to leave the highway. Maybe the loop only worked if he voluntarily took the exit. Maybe if he refused, he could break through. Vincent merged onto I-80 westbound at midnight, accelerating to 70 miles per hour. His GPS was frozen, useless, so he relied on the highway signs. He passed mile marker 439, then 441, 442. Progress. Real progress. The Flying J sign appeared at mile 443. Vincent gritted his teeth and kept driving straight. Didn't take the exit, passed it by. Mile 444. Mile 445, he was doing it, escaping. The highway ahead began to fade. Not suddenly, but gradually, like someone was erasing it. The white lines dimmed. The asphalt became translucent. Vincent could see through the road's surface to empty space below. Not ground, not earth, just void. He kept driving, his tires somehow gripping the increasingly transparent highway. The world around him was disappearing, fading to nothing. Only the road remained, a thin ribbon of semi-real pavement suspended in emptiness. Mile marker 450. The road was almost completely transparent now. Vincent could barely see it. His headlights illuminated nothing. He was driving through absolute darkness on a highway that barely existed. And then ahead in the distance, lights appeared. The Flying J sign. Exit 439. He was back at the beginning, having driven a complete loop, the highway forming a closed circle in space that shouldn't support it. Vincent took the exit, parked in the lot, and sat in his cab, staring at the truck stop building, understanding finally settling over him. He couldn't escape. This was forever. This single truck stop, this single night, repeating endlessly. He could drive in circles forever, burn infinite fuel that never ran out, accumulate infinite miles that went nowhere. In the far corner of the lot, Vincent saw a figure standing between two of the abandoned trucks. A driver, he assumed. The figure stood motionless for a long moment, then walked slowly toward Vincent's truck. As it got closer, Vincent saw the figure's face in his headlights. It was Kevin, the convenience store clerk. But Kevin was inside the building. Vincent could see him through the windows, standing behind the counter. The Kevin outside reached Vincent's driver's side window and tapped on the glass. Vincent reluctantly rolled it down. "You should accept it," the outside Kevin said. His voice was hollow, echo-distorted. "Fighting makes it worse. Park your truck with the others. Come inside. Work your shift. Serve the customers. Drive the loop. It's not so bad once you stop resisting. Time pass. You don't age. You just exist here forever, safe and constant. No more worrying about deadlines or traffic or accidents. Just the truck stop, just the loop, forever and ever and ever." Vincent rolled up his window. The outside Kevin smiled sadly and walked back toward the abandoned trucks, fading into shadows. Vincent sat alone in his cab, surrounded by the fluorescent glow of the truck stop, and tried to decide if he should keep fighting or accept his new existence. Outside, the highway stretched away into darkness, promising escape that would never come. Inside, the convenience store offered comfort and routine that would never end. Vincent had all the time in the world to choose. Time no longer meant anything at exit 439, where the loop ran eternal and drivers became permanent fixtures in a single moment stretched across eternity. Story 7. The Vanishing Fuel. Gregory Mason had been hauling refrigerated produce across the country for 9 years without incident. His 2020 Kenworth W900 was meticulously maintained, every system checked regularly, fuel efficiency carefully monitored. Greg prided himself on predictability. He knew exactly how many miles per gallon his rig achieved under various conditions, could calculate fuel consumption down to the tenth of a gallon. This mechanical precision made what happened in Oregon on December 19, 2023, all the more terrifying. Greg had filled both fuel tanks, complete fill, 300 gallons total, at a truck stop in Portland at 6:00 p.m. His route took him east on Interstate 84, hauling lettuce and tomatoes to Boise. The fuel gauge showed completely full, both tanks at capacity. Greg's detailed logbook recorded the fill-up: 300 gallons, fuel receipt stapled to the page, odometer reading 487,920 miles. At his rig's typical consumption rate of 6.8 miles per gallon, he had enough fuel for approximately 2,040 miles, more than enough for the 430-mile trip to Boise with substantial reserves. At mile marker 22, just past Corbett, Greg noticed the fuel gauge dropping faster than normal. After only 15 miles of driving, the gauge showed 3/4 full, a loss of roughly 75 gallons. That was impossible. His truck couldn't burn 75 gallons in 15 miles unless the engine was catastrophically malfunctioning, and all his other gauges showed normal operation. Engine temperature normal, oil pressure perfect, RPM consistent. No warning lights, no unusual sounds, no performance issues. Greg pulled onto the shoulder to investigate, fearing a fuel leak. He climbed out and walked around his truck with a flashlight, checking both fuel tanks and all connecting lines. No leaks, no drips, no fuel smell in the air. The tanks appeared intact, and the ground beneath his truck showed no evidence of spilled diesel. The fuel was simply vanishing from inside sealed tanks without any physical explanation. He climbed back into his cab and checked the gauge again. Now it showed half full, another quarter tank gone in the 5 minutes he'd spent inspecting the truck. 150 gallons remaining from an original 300, despite traveling only 15 miles and sitting parked for 5 minutes. Greg grabbed his phone and called his company's maintenance hotline, explaining the situation. The mechanic on the phone was baffled. "Gauges can malfunction," he said, "but if there's no leak and the engine's running fine, I don't know what to tell you. Could be a faulty sensor giving bad readings." Greg decided to continue cautiously, watching the gauge carefully. He pulled back onto I-84 and resumed his trip. The fuel gauge continued dropping at an impossible rate. Every mile driven consumed what appeared to be 5 gallons of fuel, over 30 times his truck's normal consumption. At mile marker 35, the gauge showed a quarter tank remaining. Greg had traveled only 30 miles from his fill-up but had apparently consumed 225 gallons of fuel. He pulled into a truck stop at Cascade Locks, the first available fuel station. Greg filled up again, carefully watching the pump. It took 235 gallons to fill his tanks, confirming that the fuel was actually missing, not just misreported by a faulty gauge. Greg had genuinely consumed 235 gallons in 30 miles of normal driving, a thermodynamically impossible fuel consumption rate. The pump receipt provided proof: 235 gallons, $823, $20. Greg kept the receipt, his hands shaking. Back on the highway, the gauge was dropping immediately. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. The needle visibly descended, moving in real time as Greg watched. By mile marker 45, just 10 miles from the truck stop, the gauge showed 3/4 full. Another 75 gallons vanished. Greg's mind raced through possibilities. Fuel siphoning. Impossible. He'd been driving continuously. No one could access his tanks. Leak. He'd checked thoroughly, found nothing. Gauge malfunction. The pump readings confirmed the fuel was actually being consumed. At mile marker 55, with the gauge showing half full, Greg saw something in his rearview mirror that made his blood run cold. A thin stream of something was trailing behind his truck, visible in his tail lights. Not liquid, it was too light, too dispersed. More like smoke or vapor, but wrong somehow. The stream was dark, almost black, twisting in the air behind his trailer in patterns that didn't match wind currents. Greg pulled onto the shoulder again and got out, leaving his engine running. The black vapor was coming from underneath his truck, near the fuel tanks, but not leaking. It was flowing upward, defying gravity, rising from the tanks in thin tendrils that coalesced into that stream trailing behind the vehicle. As Greg watched, the vapor formed shapes in the air. Not random patterns. Deliberate shapes, letters. The vapor spelled out words hanging in the air behind his truck. Feed me. Then the letters dissipated and reformed. Hungry. Then more. Greg backed away, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. The fuel wasn't being consumed by his engine. Something else was drinking it. Something that was using the fuel tank as a food source, draining the diesel and converting it into that black vapor. Greg grabbed his phone and took photos of the vapor, the words forming in the air, the impossible scene. He filmed a video, narrating what he was seeing, trying to document the insanity. When he played the video back, it showed his truck on the shoulder, engine running, but no vapor, no black stream, no words. The camera wasn't capturing what his eyes could clearly see. Whatever this phenomenon was, it existed outside the spectrum that cameras could record. The fuel gauge now showed a quarter tank. In the 30 minutes since his last fill-up, driving maybe 25 miles, Greg had consumed 225 gallons again. He'd be empty in less than 10 miles. He made a decision. He couldn't continue to Boise. He'd need to refuel every 20 miles, spending thousands of dollars on fuel that would vanish into whatever entity had attached itself to his truck. He needed to return to Portland, get the truck examined by mechanics, figure out what was happening. Greg turned around at the next crossover, heading back westbound on I-84. Maybe returning to where this started would help. Maybe the phenomenon was location-specific. As soon as he headed west, the fuel consumption stopped. The gauge held steady at a quarter tank, not dropping. Greg drove 10 miles westbound, still steady. 15 miles, no change. Whatever was draining his fuel only activated when he traveled east. Greg pulled into the same truck stop in Cascade Locks where he'd refueled earlier. The same attendant was working. Greg approached him. Has anyone else reported strange fuel consumption on this route? Trucks burning fuel impossibly fast heading east. The attendant looked uncomfortable, not quite meeting Greg's eyes. You should turn back, he said quietly. Go back to Portland. Don't try to go east tonight. Come back tomorrow or take a different route. What do you mean? Greg demanded. What's happening? You know something, tell me. The attendant glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. There's something wrong with the highway, he whispered. Has been for 6 months. Trucks heading east report bizarre fuel problems. Some never make it. They run out of fuel between here and Hood River, call for help, but when tow trucks arrive, they find the vehicles completely empty. Not just out of fuel, empty. No drivers. Just abandoned trucks with every drop of fuel gone and the drivers vanished. Greg felt his skin crawling. What happens to the drivers? The attendant shook his head. Nobody knows. They disappear. Highway Patrol has found 8 abandoned trucks in the past 6 months. They investigate, but there's no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle. The drivers just vanish. If you keep going east, if you let whatever it is drain all your fuel, you'll be next. Turn back. Wait for daylight. Don't drive I-84 east at night. Greg returned to his truck, his mind reeling. He needed to deliver his cargo, 350,000 pounds of produce on a tight schedule. But continuing east meant feeding. The entity was attached to his truck, risking running out of fuel completely and potentially vanishing like those other drivers. He sat in his cab trying to decide what to do. His phone rang. The dispatcher. "Greg, we've got temperature alerts on your refrigeration unit. Trailer temp is rising. You need to keep moving or that produce will spoil." Greg checked his trailer monitoring system. The temperature was indeed climbing, from the required 36 degrees up to 42 degrees. The refrigeration unit was failing. He needed to maintain highway speed to keep the cooling system operating properly. Greg made a choice. He would continue east but keep his fuel above half tank. He'd stop every 10 miles to refuel if necessary, no matter the cost. He wouldn't let the tanks run to empty. He wouldn't risk becoming another vanished driver. Greg left Cascade Locks heading east, fuel tanks at full capacity again. The consumption resumed immediately. The gauge dropped steadily, that black vapor trailing behind his truck, forming words. Hungry. More, feed me, not enough. Every word a demand, a threat. Greg watched his odometer and fuel gauge obsessively. At 10 miles, he exited at Hood River and found a fuel station. Filled up. The pump showed he'd consumed 168 gallons in 10 miles. Back on the highway, gauge dropping, vapor streaming. This pattern continued through the night. Greg would drive 10 to 15 miles, exit, refuel, continue. Each stop cost $400. He'd burned through $3,000 in fuel costs before reaching the Dalles, having traveled less than 90 miles, a distance that should have cost about $60 in fuel. The black vapor grew thicker with each refueling, the words becoming more aggressive. Never enough. Always hungry. You will feed me. At 2:00 a.m. between the Dalles and Biggs Junction, Greg's worst fear materialized. His fuel gauge hit empty while he was between exits, no fuel stations within reach. The engine sputtered. Greg coasted onto the shoulder as the truck died, momentum carrying him to a stop. He sat in sudden silence, no engine sound, just the whistle of wind outside his cab. The black vapor that had been trailing behind began flowing forward, moving along both sides of his truck, converging at his driver's door. The vapor pressed against his window, darkening it, blocking his view. Greg could hear something now, a sound like breathing, deep and slow, coming from the vapor itself. Words formed in the condensation on his windshield, written from the outside. Empty. All gone. Now you. Greg's door handle began to turn, moved by no visible hand. He'd locked it, but the lock clicked open on its own. The door began to open. Greg grabbed his CB radio and screamed into it. Mayday, mayday, this is truck 447 eastbound on I-84 at mile marker 112. I need immediate assistance. Static answered him. Then a voice came through, his own voice, distorted and wrong. No help coming. Road is hungry. Road needs to feed. You are food now, you are fuel. The door swung fully open. The black vapor poured into his cab, cold and suffocating. Greg couldn't breathe, couldn't see. He felt himself being pulled out of his seat, dragged toward the open door. He grabbed the steering wheel, holding on with desperate strength. His hands began slipping. The vapor wrapped around his arms, his legs, his throat, cold like ice, empty like void, hungry like nothing Greg had ever imagined. Just as Greg's grip failed, headlights appeared behind his truck. A vehicle pulled up, a highway patrol car. A trooper got out, flashlight in hand, and the black vapor released Greg instantly, flowing away, disappearing. Greg gasped for air, collapsing back into his seat. The trooper approached cautiously. "Sir, are you all right? We got multiple reports of a distressed driver at this location." Greg couldn't speak for a moment, just gasped and pointed at where the vapor had been. Nothing remained visible. The trooper checked around the truck, then returned to Greg. "You're out of fuel," he said, shining his flashlight at the fuel gauge. "I'll call a fuel truck. You'll be okay. Just sit tight." The trooper stayed with Greg until the fuel truck arrived an hour later. They pumped 50 gallons into Greg's tanks, enough to reach the next station. Greg drove straight through to Boise, not stopping except for fuel, keeping his tanks above half full at all times. The vapor continued trailing his truck, but less aggressively now, as if the patrol officer's interruption had weakened it. Greg delivered his cargo and immediately drove south, taking Highway 95 into Nevada, 50 west, a much longer route back to Portland, but one that avoided I-84 entirely. Greg never drove I-84 through Oregon again. He told his company he'd had mechanical problems and requested routes that avoided that highway. They accommodated him without question. They'd lost drivers on I-84, and while they never confirmed it officially, Greg suspected they knew something was wrong with that stretch of road. But the black vapor never completely left Greg's truck. Sometimes, late at night when he's driving empty highways, Greg sees wisps of it in his mirrors, thin streams of darkness flowing from his fuel tanks, forming words in the air behind him. "Remember me, still hungry, waiting for you." His fuel consumption returns to normal for weeks at a time, then suddenly spikes for no reason, burning through fuel at impossible rates for a few hours before returning to normal. Greg has calculated that in the 2 years since that night on I-84, his truck has consumed approximately 8,000 gallons more fuel than it should have based on miles driven. 8,000 gallons feeding something that lives in the space between the fuel tank and the engine. Something that drinks diesel fuel like water and hungers for something more. Greg knows that one day his luck will run out. One day he'll run empty on a dark highway with no patrol officer nearby to interrupt, and the vapor will finish what it started. Until then, Greg drives with his fuel gauge obsessively monitored, never letting it drop below half, feeding the thing that has attached itself to his truck, hoping that if he keeps it satisfied, it will leave him alone, but knowing, deep in his heart, that eventually hunger always wins. Story 8. The Detour. Maria Santos had driven the route from Las Vegas to Los Angeles hundreds of times over her 7-year trucking career. Interstate 15 through the Mojave Desert was as familiar to her as her own driveway. Every exit, every mile marker, every service plaza memorized through repetition. On August 12, 2024 at 9:30 p.m., Maria left Las Vegas hauling electronics to a distribution center in Ontario, California. She expected to arrive by 2:00 a.m., a routine trip she could drive half asleep. Instead, she encountered a detour that shouldn't exist, a version of California that wasn't quite real. The detour signs appeared at mile marker 272, just past the Nevada-California border. Orange construction signs with flashing lights directed traffic off I-15 onto a temporary route. Detour exit here, bridge construction ahead. Maria had driven this exact route 3 days earlier without any construction, but projects could start quickly. She followed the signs, exiting onto a two-lane highway that curved northwest into increasingly empty desert. The detour route was well marked, signs appearing at regular intervals. Detour follow signs rejoin I-15 in 23 miles. Maria settled in for the deviation, expecting to add maybe 30 minutes to her trip. The road was smooth, newly paved, with fresh paint marking the lanes. No other traffic accompanied her, unusual for I-15, which typically had steady traffic even late at night, but construction detours often split traffic flows across multiple routes. At 10 miles into the detour, Maria passed a town called Meridian. She'd never heard of any town by that name in this part of California, but the Mojave had plenty of tiny, unincorporated communities. The town appeared modern and well-maintained. Streetlights illuminated neat rows of houses, a gas station, a small shopping center, but something was off. Every building's lights were on, every streetlight burning brightly, but Maria saw no people, no cars on the streets, no residents visible through house windows. The entire town looked like a movie set, perfectly arranged but completely uninhabited. Maria continued following the detour signs. At 15 miles, she passed another town. The sign read, New Harmony, population 2,847. This town was larger, with a main street visible from the highway, businesses lining both sides. Again, every light was on, storefronts illuminated, but no people anywhere. Maria's unease grew. 2 towns fully lit, completely empty at 10:00 p.m. on a Monday night. That wasn't normal, even for remote desert communities. At 20 miles, the detour signs indicated rejoin I-15 3 miles. Maria felt relief. Soon she'd be back on familiar highway, back in the world that made sense. But then she rise and saw what lay ahead, and her relief transformed into confusion and fear. In the distance, maybe 10 miles away, Los Angeles sprawled across the landscape. The unmistakable skyline of downtown, the vast grid of lights stretching to the horizons, the entire massive city clearly visible. That was impossible. Maria was still at least 90 miles from Los Angeles. The city shouldn't be visible from this location, not even on the clearest night. Yet there it was, close enough that Maria could make out individual buildings, the U.S. Bank Tower prominent among the high-rises. The city looked normal, but its position was completely wrong, as if it had moved 90 miles north while Maria was driving the detour. Maria grabbed her phone to check GPS. No signal. She tried her truck's GPS system. It showed a blank screen with an error message. Location unavailable. Her CB radio produced only static. All her navigation and communication systems had failed simultaneously. Maria continued driving toward where the detour promised to rejoin I-15, her eyes fixed on the impossible proximity of Los Angeles. The junction appeared ahead, a merge point where the detour route connected to what should have been Interstate 15. Maria took the entrance ramp and found herself on a highway that looked like I-15. Same configuration, same 6 lanes, same style of signs and markers. But the mile markers were wrong. Instead of the expected markers in the 230s where she should have rejoined, the first marker she passed read mile 0. Maria drove past marker 1, then 2, then 3, counting up from 0 as if she was at the beginning of the highway, not halfway through California. Los Angeles remained visible ahead, still looking impossibly close. At mile marker 10, Maria saw an exit sign, Los Angeles City Center, next exit. She was supposedly still over 80 miles from LA, Yet the exit claimed to lead directly to downtown. Maria didn't take the exit. Something felt profoundly wrong about this version of I-15. This version of California where distances didn't match reality and major cities appeared in wrong locations. She continued south, or what she believed was south, though her directional certainty was eroding. The highway stretched ahead, empty of other, lined with lights that seemed too bright, too perfectly spaced. At mile marker 25, Maria passed a rest area. The sign read, California Welcome Center Information, Restrooms, Food. Maria needed to regroup, to figure out what was happening. She pulled off the highway into the rest area parking lot. The facility looked modern and well-maintained, architecturally similar to newer California rest stops. Lights illuminated the entire area, but like the towns she'd passed, Maria saw no other vehicles, no people. She parked her truck and approached the main building cautiously. The doors were unlocked, sliding open automatically as she approached. Inside, the rest area looked perfect: clean floors, well-stocked vending machines, comfortable seating areas, everything maintained and functional. A large map of California dominated one wall, and Maria walked over to check it. The map showed California, but wrong. The state's familiar shape was distorted, stretched in some areas and compressed in others. Los Angeles appeared roughly where San Luis Obispo should be. San Francisco was positioned near the Oregon border. The entire geography of California had been rearranged, as if someone had redesigned the state without regard for actual geography. Interstate 15 was marked on the map, running from Nevada to Los Angeles, but the route was completely straight, no curves, no geographic features forcing the highway to bend, just a perfectly straight line from border to coast. Maria felt cold sweat forming on her skin. She wasn't in California anymore. Or rather, she was in California, but a different California, one where geography followed different rules. The detour had taken her somewhere wrong, somewhere that looked like her world but operated on altered principles. She needed to return to the detour exit, go back the way she'd come, find her way back to the real I-15. Maria ran back to her truck and turned around, heading north on I-15, retracing her route. The mile markers counted down: 25, 24, 23. She reached mile marker 0, the point where she'd entered this highway from the detour route. But the exit wasn't there. The detour junction had vanished. Only empty desert stretched away from the highway, no connecting road visible. Maria pulled onto the shoulder and looked back. Solid behind her, solid highway ahead, no exits, no junctions, no way off. She continued north, hoping to find another exit, any exit. Mile markers counted down into negative numbers: -1, -2, -5, -10. She was driving into negative mileage, mathematically impossible positions. At marker -15, she saw a town ahead. As Maria drove closer, she recognized it: New Harmony, the empty town she'd passed earlier. But she was driving north now, away from where the town should be. The detour route had been northwest of this highway. New Harmony shouldn't appear on this route. Maria drove through New Harmony again, still lit, still empty, still perfectly maintained and completely devoid of people. On the other side of town, she found an exit labeled Meridian 5 miles. Maria took it desperately, hoping Meridian would provide another route, another option. The exit led to a 2-lane road that curved through darkness. After 5 miles, Meridian appeared ahead, same as before, lights on, streets empty, no residents. Maria drove through Meridian's main street slowly, looking for any sign of life, anyone she could ask for help. All the buildings looked operational. The gas station had its pumps active. The convenience stores open, sign was lit. Restaurant lights showed table settings visible through windows. But no people anywhere. Maria stopped her truck in the middle of the main street and got out, shouting, "Hello, is anyone here? I need help." Her voice echoed off the buildings and faded into silence. No response. No movement. Maria walked to the nearest building, a diner called Meridian Family Restaurant. She pushed open the door. Inside, tables were set with plates and silverware. Coffee pots sat on warmers. Food was visible in display cases. Everything looked freshly prepared and ready to serve, but no staff, no customers, no people. Maria touched one of the coffee pots, hot, recently brewed. Someone had been here recently, or something was maintaining an appearance of recent presence. Maria backed out of the diner and returned to her truck. She drove through Meridian, continuing on the road through town, hoping it would connect to another highway, some route back to reality. The road exited Meridian heading south, and after 10 miles of empty desert, Maria saw signs for I-15. Relief washed over her. Found it again. Maybe this time it would be the real I-15, the one that existed in her world. The entrance ramp led to a highway that looked identical to the one she'd been on before. Maria merged and checked the first mile marker, mile 0. She was back at the beginning, the same wrong highway, the loop closing. Maria screamed in frustration, pounding her steering wheel. She was trapped in a closed system. Detour route to wrong I-15 to empty towns and back to wrong I-15. An endless loop with no exit to reality. At mile marker 15, Maria saw something different this time. A truck was parked on the shoulder ahead, hazard lights flashing. Maria's heart leaped. Another person, someone else who might be trapped, someone who could help figure this out. She pulled over behind the truck and climbed out. The truck was identical to hers. Same make, same model, same company logo, same license plate number. It was her truck. Maria was looking at a duplicate of her own vehicle, parked on the shoulder. She approached cautiously and looked in the driver's window. A woman sat in the cab, slumped over the steering wheel, not moving. Maria couldn't see the woman's face, just dark hair and a red jacket, the same jacket Maria was wearing. Maria backed away, her mind reeling. The woman in the truck was her. Another Maria, another version trapped here. How many Marias were driving this loop? How many had taken the detour, entered this wrong California, and become stuck in endless repetition? Maria looked down the highway in both directions. In the distance, both north and south, she could see other trucks parked on the shoulder, tiny shapes marked by flashing hazard lights. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All of them probably identical to hers. All of them probably containing versions of herself, trapped at different stages of the loop. Maria got back in her truck, her original truck, she hoped, though she could no longer be certain. She had to break the loop. Had to find something different, some action that would create a new outcome. The detour had taken her here, maybe deliberately going off-road, leaving the designated routes entirely, would break the system. Maria saw a gap in the highway's fence ahead, probably created by previous desperate drivers. She aimed for it. Her truck plowed through desert scrub, leaving the highway behind. No roads, no markings, just open desert. Maria west, toward where the real California should be, where the real Los Angeles should eventually appear if she drove far enough. Her truck bounced over rough terrain, suspension protesting. She drove for 30 minutes, odometer showing 20 miles from the highway, deeper into desert that all looked the same, flat, empty, featureless. Then Maria's headlights caught something ahead, a highway. She de-circled back somehow, despite driving straight west. She pulled onto the highway, I-15, mile marker 0. The loop was unbreakable. Space itself curved back. Roads led back to roads, and every direction ultimately returned to the same point. Maria parked on the shoulder and sat in her cab, trying not to cry. She remained parked for hours, watching other trucks pass heading both north and south. Most looked normal, driven by confused drivers probably wondering why this stretch of I-15 was so empty, why they couldn't get a GPS signal. None of them stopped. None of them saw Maria waving frantically. She was invisible to them, or they were invisible to her, each driver experiencing a slightly different version of this wrong highway, all of them trapped in overlapping but separate loops. Dawn came. Light spread across the desert, revealing landscape that looked completely normal, mountains in the distance, Joshua trees dotting the scrubland, power lines running parallel to the highway. Everything except the mile markers counting from 0 and the impossible proximity of Los Angeles suggested normal California. Maybe if Maria just kept driving, she'd eventually find the edge of this trap, the boundary where wrong California ended and real California began. She drove south again, toward Los Angeles. The city skyline remained perpetually 10 miles away, never getting closer no matter how long Maria drove. At mile marker 200, having driven for hours, Los Angeles looked exactly as distant as it had at mile marker 15. The city was unreachable, a mirage that maintained constant distance. Maria's fuel gauge showed half empty. She'd need to refuel soon. The towns, Meridian and New Harmony, presumably had working gas stations, but using their fuel meant accepting the reality of this place, becoming more deeply entangled in wrong California's logic. Maria had no choice. She exited at New Harmony, pulled into the gas and filled her tanks. The pumps worked normally, accepting her fuel card, dispensing diesel. The receipt printed out showed normal pricing, normal date, the name New Harmony Service Station, California. Everything appeared legitimate. Maria kept the receipt, one more piece of evidence that she'd been here, that this was real. She drives I-15 still. Mile markers counting from 0, Los Angeles forever 10 miles away, towns that are lit but empty, rest areas that are maintained but abandoned. Maria has been driving for 3 months now, or maybe 3 days, or maybe 3 hours. Time doesn't work consistently here. Her family has presumably reported her missing. Her truck and cargo have vanished from the real world. But in this wrong California, Maria continues hauling her load of electronics toward Los Angeles, a delivery that will never be completed to a city that can never be reached. Sometimes Maria passes herself on the highway, other versions, other Marias in other trucks, all driving the same loop. They don't acknowledge each other, can't communicate, each locked in their own private version of the trap. Maria knows she's become one of the ghost stories truckers tell, the driver who took a detour near the California border and vanished, another mysterious disappearance on America's highways. Maria knows that eventually she'll park her truck on the shoulder like those others she saw, and she'll slump over her wheel in exhaustion, and another version of herself will drive past and see her there and realize what's coming. Until then, Maria drives. Mile 0 to mile 200 and back to mile 0. Past Meridian and New Harmony, past the rest area with its impossible map, past the exit to Los Angeles that leads nowhere. The detour that brought her here is gone, erased, probably waiting for another driver on another night. And somewhere in the real California, on the real Interstate 15 construction signs, warn of bridge work ahead directing traffic onto a temporary route that curves northwest into the desert, and the next trucker who follows those signs will find themselves counting mile markers from 0. watching Lowe's angels stay 10 miles away, forever wondering why they can't find any way home.